Welcome to our third discussion in our four-part series of videos from Fluid Power World and the experts from Tribute as we delve into best practices for industrial distribution. I'm Mary Gannon, editor of Fluid Power World, and I'm joined by Bill Horrigan, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Tribute. In our last discussion, Bill touched on key performance indicators, or KPIs, distributors should be paying attention to. And so today we're going to talk more about that in depth. Bill, in your experience over the years, what are the most critical things a distribution shop needs to be keeping its eyes on?
This is probably my favorite topic because having your finger and thumb on the pulse of the business is critical to the success. And it's funny because we're seeing now second and third generations take over these businesses, and they're kind of set in their ways due to the culture, and they're not managing things that they should be managing because it's really hard to grow the businesses unless you have the metrics so you can figure out what's wrong and how to correct them. And it's amazing. I go back to the second and third generation that I visited their dad or their grandpa back in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s, and they're still running the business the way they did back then. And the business is still the same revenue. Not much has changed. But so what I try to do is encourage them to start managing a daily routine as far as capturing data, these key performance indicators, and doing something with them. Like, for example, the big one is lost sales. I harp on that a lot because there's so much strategic value to that. If somebody calls in and we don't have the product, if we're not managing that, we'll never have the product. And somebody will call back and we still don't have it because nobody told me about it. Or if a salesman was rude and they call somebody else, well, we want to know that. And if the price was too high, how do you fix the price if we don't know the price was too high? Because then they're going to not call you back. So that's just one of many that I would be tracking, in addition to tracking quotes to orders. For example, how many calls did we get today? We got 20 calls, 10 of them got converted to orders. Okay, we got a 50% close rate. Why didn't we get the other 50%? We want to increase that number, but if you don't know why you didn't get that 50%, you can't fix it. And there's just so many other things. For example, average sale per employee, or conversion rates. Yours is 25% and Joe's is 32%. Why is yours different than yours? Don't you have the tools? We need to train you better. There's just so many elements of the business that you could fix if you knew what was going on. So those are two of the big ones that I would be really focused on.
Are there any other problematic areas that people should be looking at?
There's quite a few, actually. Having grown up in the fluid power business, as I had started in that business from the beginning, and I learned a lot watching, because I didn't know anything about that business. And when I first started, my eyes were wide open, and I was watching what was going on. And the one that was the most interesting, I couldn't figure out at the end of the day. The owner would walk around to all the customer service people's desks and look to see if there was any pick tickets sitting on their desk. And the philosophy was a day's work in a day's time. If those pick ticket printed to the shop to go pull it and ship it, basically what that meant is the system only printed if you could ship it. So if it didn't ship, there was an issue. So he'd walk around saying, okay, why didn't they ship? The inventory's there, they're not on credit hold, this needs to go out the door. So there, good ERP systems will have a report that says, show me all the orders that printed today that didn't ship today. So we can figure out why didn't they go. Is somebody slacking, or was the inventory not there and it should have been there? So that's a big one. Another big one, probably my biggest pet peeve is negative on hand. Oh my goodness. To this day, there's never been a case where I walked in and the customer didn't have the same part number set up 3 or 4 or 5 different ways. And they will all tell you that. They'll have it set up as a 1, 2, 3, and then in there is a 1-2-3 and a 1-2, which creates all kinds of problems. And especially negative on hand. They'll sell one, but they'll ship the other one. So what ends up happening is the inventory's off. And the worst thing is the average cost is really screwed up at that point, and accounting loses their mind because it just rolls downhill effect, and it affects a lot of parts of the business. And
that'll mess up your inventory.
Big time.
Which I'm sure is another issue that you've probably dealt with is watching how the inventory flows in and out.
Absolutely. And, inventory turns, that's another issue. And gross margin return on your inventory. All those things get impacted by these type of things. And another big one is excess and dead stock. It's amazing in this day and age with the technology we have that people don't do a better job of managing that. Any good ERP system will keep track of how many you sell per month, and then if you get to a point where you haven't sold X number in a certain period of time, or you've got more inventory on your shelf that you sell in the course of a month or 2 months. Like they say the industry average says you should have no more than 2 times your monthly demand. Well, if you do ever get to that point, you need to do something with that product.
Right.
And in most good systems, what they'll do is they'll export it to somewhere where you can actually put it onto a web portal or offer a special promotion to your customers to get rid of that excess stock before it turns into dead stock, and you have to write it off, and again, that affects your bottom line. So
yeah, especially if it's something that has an expiration date, so to speak, like more rubber materials that will break or get brittle over time. So
and that's why like lot control and heat and batch tracking is important. Like when products come in, you should be labeling them. So just what you said, by date, like by cure date it. So you're selling the oldest one first, because if it sits there too long, it's going to become hard cracked. You have to throw it away. Right. So.
Let's talk a little bit about the cash flow area of the business. Where do you see the biggest problems in that regard?
This has been a struggle for a long time. They'll all tell you that the larger customers will tell you what the terms are going to be. The larger companies, the Timkins, the Johnson & Johnson, whatever, they'll say, our terms are 120 days, take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. So those you can't really mess with too much, but the key is to stay on top of your average days to pay. Mm-hmm. Calling, following up, making sure you're sending out acknowledgement statements, all that kind of stuff. The systems now are designed to constantly communicate with the customers and keep reminding them that they owe us money. And if you've got a good collections department, you can stay on top of that, because again, that's all about the cash flow. Mm-hmm. Another big thing which drives me crazy is, and people don't even think about this stuff, is that a lot of times you have to hold the invoice because you're waiting for inbound freight bills, right? Mm-hmm. You special ordered something, you've already shipped it, but you don't want to invoice the customer because you need that inbound freight to pass along to the customer. So you need to be watching and running a report that says, okay, show me all the invoices that I'm holding on to waiting for inbound freight, because that's cash you're sitting on that you have not invoiced. You've already paid for the product, but you haven't invoiced the customer, so you can collect that cash. So you should be staying on top of that. And then the last thing is expediting. It just drives me crazy. I ask distributors, how do you handle expediting? Well, and I said, who's doing expediting? Everybody raises their hand, right? They don't have like kind of a centralized expediting department, which drives me crazy. And that has a big impact across the board. For example, the customers should have the ability, going back to, like if you have a good B2B system, they should be able to expedite their order, go online and see where it's at. Whose fault is it? The distributors, the manufacturers? Is it delayed because FedEx is stuck in a snowstorm somewhere? But I think expediting is also key to the overall cash flow and getting that stuff shipped and billed.
And it just seems like in these businesses, this is just one aspect you can encourage efficiency and productivity, and that just flows through the rest of the business.
Yep, it's interesting. The whole process, it all ties together. And again, if you've got a good process in place and a good ERP system, and overall it'll all flow together. And again, it all flows to the bottom line and makes a big difference. So
encourages a streamlined productivity for sure.
So metrics.
So thank you, Bill, for helping to educate us on how to better understand your distribution business through these metrics and KPIs. In our final discussion, we are going to be talking about specifically hose distribution and some best practices there. So please stay tuned. Visit tribute.com for more information. And as always, visit fluidpowerworldonline.com. Thanks for being here, Bill.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for watching.